Chapter 2, Mishnah 1. Biblically, the Challah obligation applies only in Eretz Yisrael. The Mishnah discusses the law of grain that was grown outside of Eretz Yisrael, but was made into bread in Eretz Yisrael. Produce, i.e. grain grown outside of Eretz Yisrael that entered Eretz Yisrael and was then made into dough there, is subject to the Challah obligation. The requirement to separate Challah depends on whether the dough is in Eretz Yisrael at the time when the Challah obligation takes effect, which is the time when it is made into dough. Since this produce was in Eretz Yisrael at the time, it is subject to Challah. The Mishnah now discusses the law of grain that was grown in Eretz Yisrael, but was then made into bread outside of Eretz Yisrael. If the grain went out from here, Eretz Yisrael, to there, outside of Eretz Yisrael, and was then made into dough outside of Eretz Yisrael, Rabbi Eliezer obligates it in Challah on the biblical level. Rabbi Eliezer holds that the grain that grows in Eretz Yisrael is subject to Challah, even if it was not in Eretz Yisrael at the time when the actual Challah obligation takes effect, i.e. when it is made into dough. But Rabbi Akiva exempts. Rabbi Akiva holds that the place where the grain grows is not a factor in creating a Challah obligation. Rather, it depends on where it became dough. Since it was made into dough outside of Eretz Yisrael, there is no biblical obligation to separate Challah.